Hello, I'd like to welcome you back. This is Dr. Joe Caldwell once again, and we are broadcasting from the third floor of the Blackburn building here at lovely Murray State University. And today we are going to look at the history of birds. And if you are following along in your ornithology text, this would be Chapter 2 of the third edition of Ornithology. Now, avian history starts more than 150 million years ago, and this is when the reptilian ancestor of birds transformed slowly into feathered reptiles and eventually turned into the recognizable birds that we see today. Now, the first evidence of their diversification was in the Mesozoic era, and again as modern taxa in the Tertiary. However, the exact path that leads from the dinosaur to birds is still highly debated. Just as with all animals throughout the history of time, birds have been subject to extinction events, and these are usually associated with major climatic changes. And because of this, a lot of scientists believe that we are on the cusp of another major extinction event. Now, as I just mentioned, birds are believed to have evolved from reptiles, but are more closely related to the dinosaur than what we know from or as our modern reptiles. Now, even so, birds and reptiles share many common features, including that the skulls of both articulate with the first neck vertebrae by a single ball and socket device, the occipital condyle. Mammals, which evolved from a different group of reptiles, have two of these. Birds and modern reptiles have a simple middle ear with only one ear bone, and as you probably know, mammals have three. The lower jaw of both birds and modern reptiles are composed of 5 or 6 bones on each side, and mammals have only one on each side. The ankles of both birds and modern reptiles are sited in the tarsal bones. Mammals are between the lower leg bones or the tibia and the tarsi. We also find that both birds and modern reptiles lay a yolked polar egg in which the embryo develops by shallow division of the cytoplasm on the surface of the egg. In birds and some reptiles, females have 2 different sex chromosomes, Z and W, and are referred to as a heterogametic sex. In mammals, the males are heterogametic with X and Y chromosomes. So in birds and some reptiles, females are the ones who have 2 different sex chromosomes, and in that case, it's Z and W, and they are the ones that are heterogametic. Both birds and reptiles have nuclear red blood cells, whereas the red blood cells of mammals lack nuclei. Even though there are some distinct similarities between birds and reptiles, there is a more obvious link, the Archaeopteryx. This creature appears to be a direct link between past reptiles and modern birds, and is generally considered to be strong evidence of Darwin's theory of evolution. Fossils of this creature have been found in limestone deposits in Central Europe that dates from the Jurassic period and is believed to have lived with the dinosaurs. Now, during this time, there were other flying reptiles, some small, some large, that flew on wings similar to those of bats. Now, all of these were found during the time of dinosaurs, probably because air was a niche that had not yet been fully exploited. The Archaeopteryx was a crow-sized bipedal reptile with a blunt snout and many small reptilian teeth, but it also possessed a lot of avian features as well. It appeared that it may have been primarily a running and tree-climbing bird that would possibly make short hops or flights between trees. It also appears that it had possibly been capable of gliding and weak flapping flight, but not sustained flight. It also had asymmetrical wing feathers, which is a common trait to modern birds that are strong flyers. The brain also appeared to be proportional in size to modern birds and included a large visual center and expanded inner ear structures. Now, while birds appear to have evolved from the Mesozoic reptiles, the actual precursor of birds is often debated. Some scientists believe that birds may have evolved prior to true dinosaurs from a group of reptiles called Theropods. The other possibility that we're aware of is that they may have evolved from a group of small dinosaurs called Theropods. So, one thing you've got to remember, our picture of this prehistoric era is only a small fragment where we get just a glimpse of what the past was like. Until we have a more complete picture, the actual lineage of birds and other creatures of the past will be debated. So let's take a closer look at each of these possibilities. Now, Theropods were a large group of lightly built, primitive reptiles that prevailed in the early years of the Mesozoic era. The Theropods were a diverse group that gave rise to a large number of dinosaurs, including some of the flying dinosaurs called pterosaurs, some arboreal dinosaurs, and to the crocodiles. Some of these apparently had elongated scales that may have been precursors to feathers. Now, the Theropods had some remarkable similarities between the Archaeopteryx, especially the Compsognathus. Remember the Compies from the movie Jurassic Park? Theropods. Okay? Velociraptors were also theropods. These lightly built, bipedal reptiles with their elongated snout and small teeth look remarkably similar to modern birds. But remember, when we talk about adaptive radiation, this could just be another instance of this, with the separation being time as opposed to being space. Again, we can never know for certain. We can only seek out evidence and develop theories as new evidence is uncovered. Well, no matter what the precise origin of birds are, recent evidence turned up in China, Spain, and Patagonia linked the Archaeopteryx to modern birds. Several characteristics between those fossilized birds and modern birds include a horny beak, long tails, and forelimbs with advanced flight capability. The Anathronites dominated the first phases of early avian evolution, ranging in sizes from sparrows to vultures. As birds moved from the form of Archaeopteryx, we saw strength modifications in the hand, forearms, and pectoral girdle, the ability to raise the wings high over the body and fold them, and a large pygostyle for support of a tail fin, which are all necessary for sustained flight. Some of these new birds also had a perching foot with an opposable rear toed called a halix. After all that work getting to be close to being a bird, none of these Anathronites survived into the Tertiary. So pretty much they all disappeared along with the dinosaurs in the mass extinction that marked the end of the Mesozoic era. So all that work for nothing. Ornithria is the line that ultimately gave rise to modern birds. These guys included small, finch-sized birds in the early Cretaceous period. Later, members had advanced wing structures, the ability to fly, and a perching foot. By the late Cretaceous, ornithine birds exhibited a wide range of sizes that mirrored modern wading birds, diving birds, perching birds, and flightless birds, which evolved from some flight-capable birds. Most of these birds also disappeared at the end of the Mesozoic era, along with the dinosaurs and the erythrinites. But a few of these were able to survive and hung on and eventually became the early relatives of modern birds. So now let's talk a little bit about the evolution of both feathers and the evolution of flight. Now, Archaeopteryx was the first animal that we know of with well-developed feathers. We are now aware of other animals, such as some early reptiles and dinosaurs, that had modified scales that were feathers and protofeathers. These protofeathers have been called dinofuzz, which were filamentous structures with a similar structure to modern feathers, just smaller and finer. But these are still controversial as to whether or not they were actual feathers. Less controversial are the well-preserved asymmetrical veined feathers that resemble modern flight feathers that have been found on some dinosaurs. Now, we presume that feathers evolved from scales of some kind, but they may have also evolved from a novel epidermis structure. Contrary to many early speculation, feathers did not evolve initially in concert with the evolution of flight. Rather, avian flight followed the initial evolution of the veined feathers, which started with flapping and gliding. Or at least that's what we currently believe to be the most accurate explanation for how these developed. And you got to remember that this can change over time as we get new evidence. So, speaking of the evolution of flight, there are two basic theories of how flight evolved. It's believed to have evolved either through running and flapping or through the arboreal lizard theory or arboreal whatever theory. The arboreal theory is based on early birds and reptile thingies jumping and gliding from tree to tree. The cursorial or running theory is that the early birds and reptile thingies, whatever they were, ran along the ground and flapped their wings to gain speed. And as they were doing this, they leapt and flapped their wings, trying to, gain a little bit of speed as they were going along. And possibly either one of these or both could have led to the development of flight. Now, if you think about it, these two theories are not necessarily mutually exclusive and may have included a bit of both. And you can see this behavior today in modern chickens and other gallinaceous birds. As our birds slowly evolved, improvements to aerodynamics, long and strong tail feathers, and a strong shoulder and wrist structure help birds to get closer to taking permanent flight. The most important step that we believe in the evolution of sustained flight, is the evolution of the bastard wing, or the alula, which changes the airflow over the wing, allowing birds to fly at slow speeds. Now, this was found on a 115-year-old tooth goldfinch-sized Ornithian bird. Now, how this thing lived for 115 million years, I'll never know. But, now, once this happened, all the pieces for sustained flight were in place. And maybe, it was that velociraptor was chasing one of these proto-dino birdie thingies, and it ran off a cliff, and flight was born. Again, we're never going to know exactly what happened. But the best we can do, and basically it's what science is to examine the evidence and to make some educated conclusions based on that evidence. So now that our feathers have evolved and we have learned how to fly, now we're going to move into talking a little bit about modern birds, or at least early modern birds. The tertiary period that followed the Mesozoic era unleashed the diversity of modern birds as we know them. About 65 million years ago, this explosive wave of bird evolution that occurred gave rise to many of the non-passerine birds of most of the orders present today, including many of the species of large flightless birds. However, over time, only a handful of modern flightless birds, such as the tinamous and radites, were left. This period also gave rise to some huge carnivorous semi-modern birds that temporarily filled the niche left vacant by the dinosaurs. However, these birds soon became extinct. Now, somewhere between 36 and 54 million years ago, specialized water birds began filling vacant niches. During the subsequent years, woodpeckers, hummingbirds, rollers, kingfishers, and hornbills also evolved. The next big jump in evolution of birds came because of the evolution of new flowering plants and insects during the Miocene epoch in the tertiary period. This gave rise to another major wave of birds called the passerines. These new birds were able to take advantage of a wide range of niches not available to previous bird species. Now, this massive irradiation of new species occurred on an Earth very different from the one that we see today, both in terms of climate and the arrangement of the land masses. So as we continue on with our discussion of ornithology, what we are going to be doing is looking at these modern birds and the evolution that they have undergone to be able to exploit this wide range of habitat and niches. So that pretty much wraps up this lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something from it. As you can tell, there are a lot of unanswered questions about the history of birds. But until our tools get sophisticated enough to be able to tease this apart, the best we have is this evidence and the conclusions that we draw. Anyway, we will see you again next time.